I am expecting a firestorm over this one. Starscream is one of the most beloved characters in all of Transformers. He's a liar, he's a traitor, he's power hungry, he's egotistical, and other charming traits that have allowed him to endure for over 30 years. But there's been so many at this point, every series wanted to use him, so of course, not all of them can be great, and only some can be the best. Knowing that this is just my personal opinion, here's 10 of the best Starscreams of all time. Now when making a list like this, I'm looking at a lot of factors at the same time. I'm trying to determine how effective the character was in the overall plot. I'm trying to look at how significant his contribution was to Transformers as a whole, and I'm looking at how well that character was delivered. That means I'm pretty much limited to the major Starscream depictions, which means a few of the lesser ones are going to get worked in, which is why movie Starscream is here. As Starscreams go, he seems to feature none of the classic elements of the character, being just Starscream in name. In fact, in The Last Night, when Megatron finds his head and refers to him as "my treacherous friend," I was sitting in the movie theater going, no? Like, not at all? Like, he never showed any signs of power grubbing, he never showed any real ego, and he wasn't even that deceitful in any way. In fact, as far as being a traitor is concerned, I'm pretty sure he's the one who led the mission to get Megatron back in the first movie. That's kind of the antithesis of being treacherous when you're actually trying to get your leader back. Now, you could look at comic books and novels that expand the character out, but canonically I have to look at what was presented on screen. And what was presented on screen was unfortunately a pale imitation of the real Screamer. Now that I think of it, I think the only trait he did share with the original Starscream is pretty much his inability to win a fight. Believe it or not, there's a Starscream in a Beast Wars series, and no, not the one that possessed Waspinator, that's technically the G1 character. I'm talking about Beast Wars 2, where that Starscream was a completely different entity. Partnered up with BB, he was basically the Dreadwing character of that series. His toy was literally based on a Dreadwing toy. That's kind of how that works. I often find with these offshoot Starscreams that they seem to epitomize one trait above all other Starscream traits. This one is definitely the groveler, willing to lower himself and bootlick pretty much any Destron who happens to be in charge at the time. In fact, the only time he really seems to be scheming is when he's trying to keep his preferred commander in power, or when it seems like the power has shifted and he has to get in the good graces of the new guy. He doesn't seem too power hungry himself, more content to just live in the shadow of someone who has enough power to protect him in whatever he really wants to do. It's more of a Starscream based on survival than anything. Though he did get a nice upgrade when he turned into a cybernetic shark. I will admit, haven't seen a Starscream do that before. I try really hard to keep fun pub fiction out of my head, and preferably off of these lists, but I have to be honest with you guys, I get a huge kick out of the Shattered Glass Starscream. So, Shattered Glass, for those who don't know, is basically the Star Trek mirror universe thing. Heroic Decepticons, evil Autobots, and yes, a Starscream who is all about loyalty, justice, and being a brave combatant for Megatron. This is absolutely hysterical to me. Some Shattered Glass characters are just slight deviations of the originals, some are really weird takes on them. Starscream is a complete polar opposite of his usual depiction. In fact, when this Megatron ends up dying, Starscream openly weeps on his knees for his fallen commander. I'm sorry, like, say what you want about the Shattered Glass fiction, there's something hysterical about that. And I have to admit, I do get a kick out of him. The Unicron trilogy is not exactly known for the best writing, especially when you get to a series like Cybertron, but I will admit, They gave their Starscream a pretty good treatment for a while. This one is already one of my favorite Starscream designs, but character-wise, he doesn't have the cowardly streak of the original, and he's far more powerful. He is a pretty successful fighter throughout the series, and no more so than his grand scheme. This is definitely the schemer-style Starscream who managed to pull off the big one G1 Starscream never did. This is a Starscream who managed to trap Megatron and all of his loyal Decepticons in space, take command of an ancient Decepticon army, defeat every Autobot in the series back to back, and then outwit Optimus Prime to claim the show's big, super powerful MacGuffin, which turned out to be the spark of Primus itself. This is one of the best days any Starscream ever had. Okay, it did get worse from there. He got a big power-up, but he started losing a bunch of fights, and eventually just couldn't keep up with everybody else, so he kinda got nerfed. But for that major accomplishment, he more than deserves some recognition on this list. Transformers Animated was all about taking those classic characters and ramping up their personalities to, appropriately, cartoonish levels. Starscream was no different, and if any element of him came through more than the others this time, it was definitely ego. This one thought a lot of himself. We're starting to get into the Starscreams that had a lot more of the classic traits. This one loved being in charge of the Decepticons, was always looking to get rid of Megatron once the big guy was back, and always after some scheme that let him gain power. And keep in mind, this is a Starscream that secured a whole bunch of clones for himself because, well, when you're an egotistical Starscream, you pretty much want to be in your own company and only your own company. This Starscream also managed to be very difficult to kill. Even after his spark was extinguished, he kept going. And even after the all-spark power left him, he still found a way of making everything worse. So, just for sheer tenacity, I have to salute this Starscream. And yeah, he was just plain fun to watch. And here's the point where everybody turns on me. The original Starscream had to be on this list eventually, and while you probably thought he'd be higher up, I'm sorry to say, he's ending up right here. Now, of course, this is the prototypical Starscream, the origin point for all others. Some do him better, some do him worse. Really depends on what the writers are going for at the time. But this is the one that has all of those classic traits, right down to the voice that sounds like he has a road flare in his throat. We do have to admit, though, unlike the other Starscreams on this list, this one never really managed to pull off the grand coup that he always wanted to. About the best things he ever accomplished was the Combaticons, which eventually just gave Megatron 5 more soldiers, and pitching Megatron's broken carcass out of Astrotrain, which just led to him getting powered up and killing Starscream. Yeah, these plans don't really work out very well for him, but he is the Starscream everyone thinks of when you think about Starscream. He is one of the classic characters of the 80s, and yes, I do love him, but... he's not the only version of G1 Starscream out there. I've got friends who really aren't happy with the direction of the IDW comics, but I'm a huge fan of them. I think it's some of the best writing that Transformers ever got, simply because it's able to take elements of the character, find out where they come from in the character's past, and actually expand on it to create a much more in-depth character. IDW is where we find out why their particular Starscream has the ego he does, why he's keep changing bodies, and why he's never quite happy with himself. Also, this one is the manipulator. Above all, this is the Starscream who managed to do what every other Starscream always wanted to do, take full control of Cybertron, and as of this recording, still has it. That said, this is the Starscream that was willing to kill the only bot he considered a friend if it meant making all of Cybertron follow him. That power-hungry, that manipulative, that's a good Starscream. And frankly, I kind of like watching him struggle as the leader of an entire planet. He hasn't done bad, but Sometimes it's fun to see a character like him get what he always wanted and not really have it turn out to be what he expected. I will admit, this Starscream is so high on the list just because he's so much fun to watch. This is Prime Starscream, a complete departure design-wise, but still having all the classic traits that make him Starscream. And if any of them is more pronounced than the others, it's the coward of all things. You would think that would make him a less compelling character, however, it actually does a lot to give him some more depth. Part of that does go to a stellar performance by Steve Blum, depicting something similar to the original but still having way more range, so he actually has a lot more expressive personalities to him. But this is also a Starscream that knows how to seize power and control, stay in charge for as long as possible, and then get himself in and out of trouble, even if it means cooperating with the Autobots to do so. This is a Starscream who manipulated just about everybody because, frankly, he was afraid of taking any of them on head-to-head. But hey, it made him entertaining, and if you don't believe me, go watch the zombie episode with him and Knockout. Some of the best Transformers you'll ever see. As much as we herald the definitive G1 Starscream as the one from the cartoon, it's really just the one you remember the most, because not as many people read the Marvel comics. This is a Starscream who epitomized everything there is about Starscream, except had a better way of going about it, and part of that is due to the nature of comic books. Thought bubbles. This meant when he had treacherous ideas, he didn't have to blurt it out right to Megatron's face. He didn't have to show open contempt for his commander. He could just do it in his head and still pretend to be the loyal lackey. It made his deceptions all the better, and it actually let him pull off a grand coup every now and then, none of which tops the Underbase. If you don't know what the Underbase is, it's basically the database of databases. It's Wikipedia if it was a giant glowing square in space that you could just absorb energy from, and that's exactly what Starscream did. And after doing so, he actually got a few kills in, surprisingly enough. How many kills? Jetfire, Bluestreak, Brawn, Gears, Mirage, Hoist, Hound, Jazz, Blaster, Thundercracker, Skywarp, Soundwave, Laserbeak, Buzzsaw, Octane, Astrotrain, Blitzwing, the Aerobots, the Technobots, the Terracons, the Seacons, the Throttlebots, the Dinobots, the Predacons, and Omega Supreme. That's about 56 kills by my count. This is the best day any Starscream ever had. Until he blew up. Underbase will do that to you. To be fair, he got better, and he continued on all the way to the end of the Transformer comic books to be an even bigger menace in Generation 2, and then have a really weird wrap-up in the Regeneration 1 series that it's better not to mention. But for sheer G1-y Starscream, he should be the epitome of what all Starscreams want to be. Now, I do have to be honest, I did cheat a little bit on this list. See, technically, in the Unicron trilogy, one Starscream exists. However, every show depicted him so differently, had such a different idea of who his character was, I had to break it up just to be fair to all the depictions, which is why I can talk about Cybertron Starscream before, and now we talk about Armada Starscream. When we first meet him, he seems very much like the original Screamer. He seems to want power, and he seems to want Megatron out of the way. All pretty much par for the course so far. But then we find out why he's after power to get rid of Megatron. It isn't because he's interested in leading the Decepticons himself. More or less, he just really hates this Megatron. Just personally. Now that seems like a simplification of the character, but because of that slight deviation, it allows his character to do so much more. When this Starscream got his own minicons, in particular the air defense minicons, he actually found himself attached to them. All other Decepticons were treating them like weapons and tools, but this Starscream actually cared about his Minicon partners, so it was important to him to take care of them, hang out with them. It's kinda strange to see a Starscream acting like this. And it meant when Megatron came looking for his Star Saber Minicons to once again use them as a weapon, it caused Starscream to start doing things I never expected any Starscream to do. It caused him to flee the Decepticons solely to protect his Minicon partners. It made him join the Autobots, not as a scheme, legitimately wanting to join them because it gave him a shot at killing Megatron. It led him to going on missions to save stray Minicons and actually be passionate about the Autobot cause. He even formed a loose friendship with the human cast. This is Starscream that likes human. This was weird. This was really, really weird, guys. Now, eventually he fell back in with the Decepticons, but it was for a higher purpose. By that point, he was aware of a threat called Unicron. And Megatron, now Galvatron, so obsessed with getting rid of Optimus Prime, refused to believe that such a threat could even exist. So, Starscream did what Starscream had to do. Knowing Galvatron was not a leader that could actually stop Unicron, Transformers had to unite under Optimus Prime. This is a Starscream who respected Optimus Prime. What was going on in the early 2000s? Seriously. But this meant Starscream had to act himself, aiming his cannons at Unicron, forcing the Chaos Bringer to reveal himself, and getting nuked in the process. This was a moment of self-sacrifice no Starscream could ever be capable of, and it was a tragic moment as he had come full circle in his characterization, and everything he had gained and was now lost. Cybertron Starscream might have been able to defeat a dozen or so Autobots in one go. G1 Marvel Starscream might have been able to kill off 50 plus Transformers with one power-up. No other Starscream was capable of saving every Transformer. That is what makes Armada Starscream great, and it's what makes him my favorite Starscream of all time. And I'm sure some of you disagree, so did I leave any off the list that you would have included? Who would you have left off, and who's your favorite Starscream? Because I am sure there are polarized opinions on this one. I'm looking forward to reading them. Thank you guys for joining me for another Here's 10, and hopefully I'll see you again when there's 10 more.